everybody, welcome to ICUP with We.
This is an ICP podcast by a new listener and an old fan.
I'm Aaron.
And I'm Erik, and today we're actually not reviewing anything. We're just kind of letting you know what this podcast is going to be. It's just a teaser. Check it out.
Thank you for listening. I'm surprised you got this far, to be honest. No, we are, so this is a new podcast. Yeah. This is going to be a fun podcast. I was thinking, what is something that I could do with a friend to pass the time of quarantine and stuff like that? And I thought, well, I've never listened to this insane band before, literally Insane Clown Posse. So why don't I do that?
Yeah.
And then Erik, you hit me up about it as well. Tell me your thoughts, kind of, I guess, on why this is happening.
Man, I will tell you, number one, this is a cool thing to do while we've got a little bit of extra time on our hands. But if it continues, it's going to go well into, past the quarantine ending. But I think it's hilarious that of all the things we have talked about potentially collaborating on and podcasts we've joked about, this is the one that came together in 2 days and is actually happening. It's weird because we are not Juggalos. Not yet. Maybe we will end up being. Not. Maybe we'll be Juggalos after this. But I think the cool thing about this is that it's a podcast for people that are curious about ICP, and you and I will do all the stuff and we can learn together.
Yeah, we'll be your guinea pigs throughout this journey. Are we going to end up at a gathering of the Juggalos event at some point?
I mean, maybe.
So, yeah.
What I hope is that Psychopathic Records hits us up and they're like, hey, look, you're our favorite ICP podcast. Will you come to the gathering and do it live from there?
Oh my God. What a dream.
That's the dream. So here's the question for you, Aaron. You and I, we're both in bands that are decidedly not similar to ICP, but I think we both also like a lot of different types of music. Are you a hip hop and rap fan in general?
I would say so, yeah. And I'm not the biggest fan of hip hop and rap, but I do enjoy a good amount of it.
Yeah. So I'd say similar on this end. I've always loved hip hop and rap, but there's some of it that I just don't feel is built for me or accessible to me. For sure. Yeah. ICP being one of them for me. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of ICP, let's get right to it. What is your personal experience with ICP?
So I have listened to one ICP song one time.
Which one was it?
I could not tell. I could probably go back and figure it out. That's probably something I should have done to prepare for this episode.
Nah.
But here we are. No, I could not tell you. It was on our last run, with Ballista's last run. If anybody doesn't know, I'm in a band called Ballista. Erik is in a band called Hollowed Out. But it was on Ballista's last run with Virtue. I think we were just somewhere in bumfuck nowhere in the middle of the Midwest, driving through mountains. And it was probably 10 o'clock at night, and an ICP song came on, and we just laughed. We just listened and laughed, basically. Yeah. So it was a ridiculous song. I have no frame of reference. Are all their songs jokes and that ridiculous, or do they have some serious stuff? This is the kind of things that I hope to learn.
Well, I'm curious as well. I can tell you what it was like at one point in time, but I don't know now if I think there's probably still doing songs that are serious, but probably even in the serious, it's silly. I think they've gotten more silly over the years, but I don't really know. So what are your impressions of ICP and their fan base? Why did you avoid them or not listen to them? Or was it just lack of exposure?
I honestly think it was just lack of exposure, I guess, because I remember when I was growing up, I grew up pretty sheltered.
Yeah.
You know, my family, I've talked about this on many different platforms before, because I'm not embarrassed about my life like I might have, should be. But yeah, no, I grew up in a super sheltered life. Like, I had to convince my mom to take me into Hot Topic every single time I wanted to go to Hot Topic. It was like a chore to convince my mom to walk into Hot Topic. And that was just to buy Green Day wristbands.
Oh, that's definitely a thing that I would think Hot Topic has.
Yeah, hey, back then they had them by the boatloads.
Yeah.
So I remember in elementary school, this is my big memory of ICP.
Yeah.
In elementary school, there's this kid, his name was Javier. He was in my class. He watched WWE and he listened to ICP. Those are the only two things I knew about him, and he bullied the shit out of me.
Oh, damn.
So that was and I'm talking about, like, we were 8 years old.
So something we can just address here. You and I are a few years apart. We also grew up in completely different parts of the country.
Yes, that is true.
So our experience with ICP, because of that, probably differs a bit.
Yeah. So the how often are we should have talked about this. How often are we releasing these? Next episode. Let's just say next episode.
Next episode, yeah.
Is the 1991 album, we pull it up here, Bass-ment Cuts.
Bass-ment Cuts, yeah. So ICP has been doing this since 1990.
And I was born in 1994. So the first 4 albums and EPs, pieces of work that we're going to review, are pre-Aaron Locklear.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, I know.
So I'll tell you about my experience. Like, I think the dynamic of this podcast is interesting. We've got somebody who has almost no experience with ICP. They've just sort of probably been like a meme in your life in the background there. Oh, you laugh at these guys. And somebody who actually, this is actually a weird thing for me to talk about. I feel like I shouldn't have any shame associated with it, but there's such a stigma around ICP that people go, oh, you're an ICP fan, you must be like this. But I did back in the day listen to them, and I'll tell you the story. It's a little bit of a story, but I'll tell you, we might have to cut it down. You want to
hit me with it? So you've been teasing this story with me ever since this podcast began, which was 2 days ago.
Yes, 2 days worth of anticipation. All right, so I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is the furthest northwest point in Pennsylvania. It's basically like a little sliver of the state that you pass through when you're on I-90 heading from Ohio to New York. You can go through it in like a half hour, not even. So Erie is only like a 4-hour drive from Detroit. And I think maybe we saw ICP tapes and CDs show up in record stores before a lot of the rest of the country. But anyway, I came up in the hardcore scene, which was actually pretty big in Erie in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. It really helped shape who I was as a person, and sort of that DIY ethic and sort of independent mentality has always stayed with me. But believe it or not, early on, ICP was definitely a thing within portions of the hardcore scene. And I think maybe that it was at that time that hip hop and hardcore were really starting to cross over for a lot of like the new school hardcore styles and bands. And I think in some way ICP felt a little more accessible to me than a lot of the more popular mainstream rap and hip hop at the time. And maybe part of that is because it really did feel super underground and counterculture, which, like I said, is an ideology at the time that was really a core aspect of my life, still is. And the other cool thing about music back then, I don't know if this was cool. Actually, this is just different. There were no streaming services, and the idea of MP3s and downloading music was like in its infancy. There was no way to know about ICP or really any independent band unless somebody turned you onto them. They were like, hey, handed you a CD or something. And I remember how we found out about ICP. We kept seeing these CDs at the record store in the mall that had a big sticker over the cover that said Insane Clown Posse. And we kind of laughed at it. But also we were curious. We're like, what is that sticker covering? What's on that cover? Because the only other albums we ever saw that they put a sticker over the cover was stuff that was like obscene that you couldn't see. So one of my friends actually stole one of the CDs from a record store at the mall. And when we listened to it, like, it kind of blew us away. Like, we didn't expect it to be a thing that we were going to like. Like, it probably shouldn't have been. And I think it's because early on, ICP's music was something really different for us, right? The horrorcore scene was a thing that had been growing in Detroit, but like where we lived, we didn't know about that yet. Underground hip hop in general wasn't really happening around us, or at least not on that scale. But in Detroit, you had artists like Esham, and horrorcore was just becoming a part of their hip hop DNA. And I think you can even hear it in other Detroit acts. Like when you listen to some of Eminem's early records, it's got that like mix of shocking, violent content combined with humor that somehow just makes the violent content feel even more unsettling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But this was way before Eminem got big. When we first heard ICP, I remember we wondered, are these guys for real? Like, is this serious? One of my friends wouldn't listen to them because he thought they were like really sick, evil people. Like, he would hear the things they said and he's like, no, man, this isn't cool. But I also think that's part of the appeal of ICP, right? Like the music at that time, it was legitimately kind of scary. I think it was really unapologetic and vulgar on a level that we really hadn't heard before. And I think back to probably when people first listened to Eddie Murphy and Dolomite records and Richard Pryor records, and he was dropping motherfuckers and stuff, and people were like, whoa, this is wild. That's kind of how I think it was sort of our generational equivalent.
Right. It was that shock value that redefined offensive in the music sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was almost like they spoke their own language of expletives. It was weird. But I also was really getting into horror movies at that time. Like, my friends were showing me movies like Dead Alive and Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, movies that had scare and gore, but also humor. And this sort of had that going on. But here's the most important reason that I think ICP appealed to me. In the midst of all that vulgar and scary, they actually had something to say, at least at the time. And I think they still do, but I think the things that they have to say now probably have changed. But they were actually socially conscious. They were vocal about their views. And at that time, I was really getting into a lot of hardcore bands that were also super socially conscious and political, like Strife and Earth Crisis. So that concept appealed to me. ICP was very much anti-cops, against judges, and against this crooked legal system. They even talked about the moral hypocrisy of the death penalty in their songs. They spoke out against greed and the rich and politicians. They hated rednecks and bigots and racism. And one of the cool things to me, still being straight edge and was back then, is that in their music, sure, there were references sometimes, but they didn't really advocate drug use or talk about smoking weed a lot, which isn't a big deal to me. But early on, that was something that set them apart from a lot of hip hop, which at that time was really glorifying, drug use and smoking weed. Right.
And,
I mean, they even had a song that low key called out people for keeping mounted deer heads on the wall and putting rabbits' feet on their keychains and stuff like that, which, as somebody who was getting into vegetarianism and the concept of veganism, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah.
They even, I think to me, the big thing was that their message overall was there are consequences for your actions, and don't be a shitty person because it's going to come back to haunt you. I do want to call out here. There's a fair amount of misogyny in their music. I don't want anybody coming after me being like, oh, you liked all those positive messages, but you were okay with all the misogyny in their music. So I will acknowledge that there was a fair amount of sort of misogynist lyrics. But I feel like they joked about that a lot. But when they got serious, there was also a lot of sort of anti-domestic violence themes in their music. They would in one moment talk about, beating on the hoe or whatever, and then in the next moment be talking about sending somebody to hell for beating their kids or their wife. And it was a weird sort of mixed message juxtaposition. Like, I don't think people knew what to make of it. And I think that led even more to people being like confused and afraid of them early on. But I think if you were there and you were listening, you could tell what was real and what wasn't. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get that. They were trying to fit into the niche of gangster rap.
Yeah.
While also trying to be socially conscious.
Yes.
But they desperately needed to fit into both, and it kind of created a split message there.
Yeah, I think they clearly grew up listening to a lot of this, early gangster rap and what was going on at the time, and they really wanted to be associated with it. And I think it's something they gradually let go of more and more, but in the early stuff, I think it was there a lot more. I think one of the other big reasons that I thought ICP was cool was that there was a really cool collectability to their music and merch. It wasn't easy to find, and there were some super rare, like small release albums and EPs and singles. So it was fun to track it down. And there was this lore behind ICP, and the more music you found and listened to, the more you could fill in the blanks in the story. And it was like really insidery. So it felt cool to like understand all the jokes and references because you got what was going on.
Right. Yeah. It kind of let you in on a little secret. And you liked that.
Yeah.
I mean, because if I'm to understand, there's still albums and EPs and stuff that to this day aren't available on streaming platforms. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot. There's some early stuff that's not on streaming, and then there are a lot of one-off things that I think never made it onto streaming, although maybe when there's a lot of collections out there. So maybe some of that stuff has made it in there. I guess we'll find out as we go. Cause like I said, it's been a minute since I've listened.
Absolutely.
But I'll tell you, one of the big things that I think really solidified like why I thought they were cool or maybe like locked me in as a fan early on is that when, all that stuff was there and albums like Ringmaster and Terror Wheel and Riddlebox and Tunnel of Love, I think really pulled us in, and the beats and production were cool, and their overall style kind of just had this sharp aggressiveness to it that was appealing. But when they were touring on Riddlebox, they played in Cleveland, which is like an hour and a half from where we grew up in Erie. It was like between Erie and Detroit. So we got a group of friends, like 10 or 12 of us, and we drove to Cleveland. And while we were there, like my friends skated and I took pictures, and we, like a bunch of us wore like our Erie Straight Edge 814 hoodies to rep the scene and stuff. And the two bands that opened for ICP were punk bands, because back then that's kind of the scene they fit into. And right. I remember at one point the first band was like, hey, this next song goes out to all the straight edge kids. And we were like, hell yeah. And when they started playing the song, they were like, fuck you and your negativity. And I was like, oh, these guys are, oh, that's not what I thought. And I was like, I remember being like pissed at the time, like we should go kick these guys' asses or something. But looking back at it, it's pretty funny now. Anyway, that show is easily one of the most fun shows I've ever been to. It was just nonstop crowd movement, not in a huge venue. It was stage dives and crowd surfing constantly. And they were just like, they were super high energy, like jumping into the crowd and throwing bottles of Faygo in the crowd and shit. It was just, it was bonkers. It was something we were not prepared for and didn't know was going to happen. And like, right. I saw them a couple other times in the years that followed, and it was always fun, but nothing could ever really match that show. So yeah, like they left kind of a mark, and I hung on for a while, probably longer than I should have. But there was definitely a point where I had to walk away.
Yeah, I feel that. What point do you want to tease that now, or do you want to get to it when we get to the album and kind of the general time period when you did walk away?
Man, I don't, you know what, I'll talk about it now, because I think having that context ahead of time will help set up the subsequent episodes of this.
Right. I agree.
So why did I stop listening to ICP? I think there's a lot of reasons. one of them was that over time, I think their shtick just kind of started to wear thin. The longer it went on, the more they became caricatures of themselves, and it got less scary and more goofy.
Right.
Another thing was that they stopped working with Mike Clark. He produced most of their early albums. And I think that dude, when he was producing tracks, was just coming up with some of the just beats and songs that were super fucking sick. And I really liked a lot of those. And eventually they started working with other producers, which I know is probably an important step for any artist. I just didn't like it as much. And to be honest, changes are going to happen for a band that's been doing it for 30 years. I mean, look at how much hip hop in general has changed, or popular music over that time. So I guess it's just going to come down to whether you like the changes or not. Here's one of the big ones, though, for me. The story ended. Their whole concept was that, they were part of the Dark Carnival, and there was going to be 6 Joker's cards, and each Joker's card was a full-length album. And then in between, there were EPs for each Joker card called sideshows that kind of teased the next thing that was coming. And after all 6 cards were revealed, it would be the end of ICP and the end of the world. But then it wasn't. Like, the 6th Joker's card came out in 2 parts, like the last Harry Potter movie. And then nothing really ended. And I think by that time I was already kind of on the fence. But anyway, like, the album released, I thought it was over, but then they just kind of kept going. And I listened to a couple other things that they released after that, but it just didn't matter that much anymore. And I kind of stopped caring. And I hate to say this, but it sort of felt greedy. Like, I wish they had just let it end. Don't continue to cheapen what you're doing with sequels.
Right. But like they hyped something up, and then when that point came, they're like, "Oh yeah, just kidding."
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, look at what they've accomplished. They have continued to make a living doing what they love, doing it their way, and with legions of dedicated fans. So I get that, respect to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I were in their position, I would not willingly stop something that has let me travel all over the world and make tons and tons of money.
Right,
like something that I love to do. So, yeah, I don't blame them at all. That's for sure.
Right. Like, as somebody that's in a band, I still have to work a full-time job in order to do the band. These guys have made it their full-time job.
Absolutely. And that is the goal for both of us.
Right.
In both of our bands.
I also think in the midst of all that happening, like, it kind of got too big. And I don't even necessarily mean like ICP blew up, although that did happen, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think, so they have a record label called Psychopathic Records.
Right.
And they were growing the roster with all these new acts that were similar, that were releasing new music. And then ICP was guesting on those albums, and they were releasing all this extra stuff with collabs and super groups. And it was like this big ICP shared universe, and it got to be too much. Like, it was hard to keep up or care anymore. Like, I mean, we got other shit to do and listen to, right? It can't just be ICP. Although for some people, I think they did. People just bought in and became that.
Yeah,
which
I get that.
I guess leads me to another thing. There's actually one thing I was debating talking about, but I think I'm just going to wait and let you discover it on your own. And when that time comes, and it will, then we can talk about it. But I won't list the other reason. It'll be a revelation of sorts.
Perfect. I'm super excited about that to come about. That is for sure.
But back to their fans, though. I think the biggest reason that I stopped listening to ICP is because they changed, and so did their fan base. Like, they blew up for a second. They got a ton of mainstream awareness. And even if they were rejected by mainstream audiences, I think that awareness made their fan base grow. And I think those new fans started to change who ICP was and who they were making music for,
Absolutely. Yeah. I 100% get that.
Yeah. Like, they started to lean into this whole, like, we're dumb thing, which was weird for me. And they also started to lean more into, like, mainstream rock music and culture. And they did a lot of stuff that just felt like it was meant to appeal to the lowest common denominator, which I think is the era that people recognize now. And they're like, when they think of ICP, they think of Juggalo culture.
Well, yeah, when I think of ICP, I think of B-roll of, the gathering of the Juggalos. I think of just B-roll shots of trailers and day drinking and
Right.
shit like that. You know what I mean? And I know that not all, Juggalos are like that, but you're right. They did appeal to the lowest common denominator of their fan base for a little while.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that the outside world, which I was a part of up until we started recording this, it's something that the outside world saw and took note of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I started listening to them, not just when I started, for a long portion of the time that I listened to them, Juggalos weren't a thing. Like Violent J would sometimes refer to himself as a juggler or juggalo, which was like a degradation of the word juggler, like a clown in the dark carnival juggling souls. But like that wasn't a name for their fans. And although it did eventually become the name for the fan, I kind of rolled with it at first, but I started being like, I don't want to be associated with that, because it was like the Juggalos were, to me, a lot of the people that ICP was speaking out against, rednecks and stuff. And They were people that like followed ICP around the country, like members of the KISS Army or something. It was weird. They were like naked and covered in mud for a week at gatherings. It was really strange.
Yeah, like those are the people that they were speaking out against, but then all of a sudden those people are now their cash cow. Right,
exactly. And yeah, I mean, no hate. They absolutely have their positives. There's unity and family and all that. I didn't feel like I belonged there.
Right.
So there you go. That's my ICP story. I haven't listened to them actively in over 15 years, but I do see that they've released like 30 new albums since then. So I'm equally as curious to see what they've been up to as I am to go back and listen to albums I haven't heard in like 15, 20 years and see how I feel about it now.
I think this is gonna be super fun for both of us.
I hope so.
So I'm excited for it.
So why don't you run us down what the format of each episode will be?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so each episode we're gonna review one different ICP album. So we're gonna work our way through the discography, starting at the beginning, and we are only counting their group solo and collab studio albums and EPs.
Yeah,
so singles or other Psychopathic Records artists are not.
Yeah, because there's so many, count. Like Twisted and Anybody Killa and Boondocks and all these, like, there's no way we could get into that. Maybe that would be when we complete this and it's successful, we'll spin off into a Twisted podcast.
Yeah, I'll start workshopping clever names for a Twisted podcast.
Perfect.
But that won't be for like a couple years, I guess. Right. I think this podcast is going to keep us busy.
Yes.
Just this discography alone is insane.
It is insane.
You sent me the list and like chronologically, and I was like, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? This is going to be a while.
So for each episode, we'll like listen to the album. Like we'll listen to it while we're, at home or at work for the week, whatever. We'll take some notes and then we'll talk about the album track by track, and we can like discuss beats and our favorite lines and whatever, right?
Absolutely. And I'm making a rule. So we're going to have probably a growing rules list as this goes on.
Yes.
So 2 rules I have off the bat now, only one of which applies to you. That one being, we must have each listened to the album back to front, front to back, once all the way through chronologically.
Yes.
Starting from the first song going to the last one.
Yeah, no skips.
We have to. No skips. Second one being, and this one does not relate to you, so you don't have to worry about this one. You can disregard. No performance enhancing drugs while listening to said album.
That's a different podcast, man. Like you could almost do the crooked and the straight and be like, all right, what was your experience versus my experience?
Absolutely. And we could even in later episodes do it to where I listen to each album twice. One, no performance enhancing drugs, and then the other one with performance enhancing drugs.
Man, if this takes off, I guess we'll see. For now, we'll both be clear-minded.
Yes, clear-minded for now, because I don't want anything to sway me from my opinions that could make me potentially super enjoy something that I don't enjoy or hate something that I really should enjoy.
Yeah. So speaking of opinions, I'm thinking at the end of each episode, we'll each pick our favorite track from that release and we'll put them on an ICUP with We Spotify playlist. That way people that are listening don't need to go listen to the whole album. They'll hear our recap and then they can just listen to those 2 songs. And eventually it'll just be a nice long playlist of our favorite ICP songs.
Absolutely. And so favorite ICP songs, I don't know if this would be a playlist I will ever go back to after this podcast is done, but I think they might have some hidden bangers in their discography that I'm super excited to put together a comprehensive list of the best.
I promise they do. Actually, no, I can't promise that. I remember them having some. We will see.
I get you. Okay, sounds good.
How are we going to rate these albums?
So as far as the rating the albums go, we're going to be rating on a Faygo-based scale. Which will work like this. We will award the overall music/beats of the album up to 5 Faygos.
Okay.
We will award the lyrics of the album up to 5 Faygos.
All right.
And then finally, the overall vibe at the time that it was released will get 1 to 5 Faygos.
That's just like comparing it against like other releases of the time and trying to sort of...
other releases at the time. I'll probably look into some gangster rap that was being released, around the same quarter of the year that these albums were.
Perfect.
And stuff like that. And so we'll average those scores into an overall album score. So your 3 scores, my 3 scores, we'll average out those 6 into an overall album score and eventually rank, and this will show us what our favorite piece of ICP work is.
Wow. This is amazing. Right now, I know what I think my favorite is, but I cannot wait to find out because there's so much I haven't heard. This will be. What's your experience with Faygo, by the way? Are you a Faygo drinker?
I've had it a couple times. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm a Faygo drinker. I wouldn't say that I'm totally ignorant to it, though,
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, with the quarantine, I've been drinking a lot more water or trying to.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's need to do a little self-improvement as far as what I drink on a daily basis. But
don't we all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Take this time, listeners. Take this time to self-improve.
Yeah, improve yourself.
We're opening ourselves up to a whole world of different culture.
Yeah, this is a very different culture. I'll tell you what, man. Growing up as a poor kid in the Northeast Midwest area, Faygo and Food Club were the sodas we drank. That was it. So
right.
So that was.
So was Faygo more of a northern beverage? Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, it was originally started out of Detroit. It was, distributed from there.
Yeah, see, I only heard of Faygo in relation to ICP. I never, you know what I mean? So, like, I didn't even drink a Faygo, I think, until I was, 15 years old, maybe, 16. I mean, it's...
Really?
And I don't know if that's because Faygo was northern. I mean, a little bit about me. I grew up in North Texas.
Yeah.
I was born in Florida. I moved here to North Texas when I was 3. So I grew up in North Texas. I've lived in the South my entire life. So I don't know if Faygo was a just northern thing or if maybe it's just something I never saw in the convenience stores because I didn't know to look for it. Or, ICP gave Faygo a face.
Yeah,
for me.
They blew Faygo up.
And it would make sense that it was a more northern beverage. With ICP sticking to its branding so hard.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the cheap, inexpensive soda where I grew up when I was a kid, and I remember when we first started listening to ICP, we were like, what are they saying? Because there was a song where there's like a commercial break and they're like, this message brought to you by Faygo. And we were like, are they saying Faygo like the drink? What are they talking? And then we started to understand, oh, okay, we get it. Like it was just their thing.
That's incredible. That's actually really funny. They definitely gave Faygo a face.
Yeah.
And our cheap soda down here was just like the Kroger brand soda, or like Sam's Choice, the Walmart brand soda.
Yeah.
That you could buy like a can of it for like a quarter. I still love that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying.
The Kroger brand like grape soda is the best. But so yeah, we had different brands of the struggle soda is what we'll call it.
Yeah, for sure. That was the other one, Food Club. That was like the Giant Eagle, which was our grocery store chain, like brand soda. So that and Faygo.
I think I might start drinking. How about we do this? Or do you still drink Faygo?
No, I haven't had Faygo in a really, really long time.
Okay, it's probably going to be hard for me to find in my area. But why don't we stock up on a little Faygo and maybe do like a flavor review every couple episodes?
Yeah, maybe like for the EPs, like if we come across something that's only got a couple songs on it.
Yeah, we can do like a Faygo flavor review.
Oh my God, it's been a long time. If we can find it, we could totally do that. All right, so that's the setup for what this series is going to be. Let's talk about the next episode. Technically episode 1. This is 1, but it's like a teaser. So on the first review episode, you mentioned it earlier, we are reviewing Bass-ment Cuts by Inner City Posse, which came out in 1991. Right.
What is Inner City Posse? I have no clue.
So, it's weird. I don't think I've ever actually heard this. I've only heard it referenced in the songs. So I was surprised to see it on Spotify. But when they first started out, ICP was Inner City Posse. They weren't clowns. They didn't have the clown theming or anything. They were just kids trying to do like gangster rap. And I listened to just a little bit of this Bass-ment Cuts when I found it, and whoa, it is rough and of the time. But the story is that they started out trying to rap and they were like dubbing tapes and selling them and stuff, but they were getting clowned so hard by all the like real gangs and stuff that they eventually, became a laughingstock, and they just sort of owned it. They're like, all right, you call us clowns, we are clowns. And like in the mythos, like the Dark Carnival came to both of them at the same time individually, and they were like, oh, it's the Insane Clown Posse and all this stuff. But I think the truer part is they were just like, we can't keep doing Inner City Posse because we're not a gang. It's just a couple of us kids, and the real gangs are making fun of us. Let's just, let's own this and let's do our thing. And I think it kind of worked.
That makes sense. That's a good reason to switch from Inner City Posse to Insane Clown Posse, which is a switch that I would not have made if I didn't have a very good reason. Because I think Inner City Posse is a sick name, rather than Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah, especially in 1990, right?
Yeah, 100%. The 90s as a whole, almost, especially early 90s.
Yeah. So we should acknowledge here, though, we're not able to review the first couple of releases, which I still think are like they're like urban legends or myths. So those first
1990 Enter the Ghetto Zone, 1990 Territory, and then Bass-ment Cuts 1991.
Yeah, that's the first one available to stream. So that's our other limitation. We are not chasing down on eBay like rare recordings. If it's on Spotify, it's part of our list, and if it's not, we'll acknowledge it and skip it.
And if any super huge ICP fans out there want us to review them and somehow have a copy or have a way to get them to us, let us know.
Hell yeah.
I'm not going to search for it and pay for it.
No.
But if you want to, that's fine with me, listener.
Yes, listener. Assuming our listeners. I mean, I hopefully we've got a mix of long-term fans and juggalos and people that are like, Insane Clown Posse is hilarious. I want to see what these guys say.
Oh, absolutely. I'm hoping there's going to be a good mix. That's for sure.
Yeah,
and then when we do end up going to the gathering of the Juggalos, all the real fans will just kick our ass.
Yeah, totally.
Which is what it is.
I want ICP to start. I want them to start a podcast where they review our songs.
Oh, wouldn't that be funny?
Oh God.
That'd be good. Okay, so let's see here.
I think that's it.
I think that's it. That's going to be our first episode. Look out for it pretty soon. We're going to record it pretty soon. I need to listen. I still have not, at the time of this recording, I still have not listened to the album.
Okay, well, I haven't either, so we'll give ourselves like a week to listen to it, take some notes, and then we'll come back and record this thing.
Absolutely. I'm personally excited, Eric. I think this is going to be so fun.
I am stoked, and of all the weird things that we talked about doing, I don't know if I'm glad that this is the one, but
it's insane that we landed on this, but God, am I happy that we did.
Yes. So where can people find us?
Right now, we have a Twitter account. That is the only social media that we have.
Oh.
And it is ICUPWWE. The acronym at ICUPWWE. You can find us there. That is where we're going to post when episodes will come out or any sort of news that we have. Eventually, we will expand on other social medias, I would assume.
Yeah, TikTok.
But Twitter. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It's funny you say that because I am a big TikToker now.
Really?
Let me tell you. Oh, absolutely. I posted a couple videos today that already have a little over 1,000 views.
Well,
that's not a lot for TikTok, but.
Well, why don't you tell people how to find your TikTok videos?
All right, so you can actually find all of my links to everything that I do, my entire life, is on www.locklearcomedy.com, LOCKLEAR comedy.com. You can find my entire livelihood up there. I stream on Twitch, Twitch TV/Gristle Media, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which is coming up tomorrow. I don't know when this is going to be released, actually. So
depending on if you're listening on Thursdays, Tuesdays, or Sundays.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Eric, what about you? What do you got in the works? I should probably say that Ballista has a new EP coming out soon. It's being mastered right now.
Oh, shit. That's real. Cream of the crop.
Fuck yeah.
You can find me on Twitter at Nuclear is Lonely. I'm admittedly not a big social media-er because it's just too much society all in one place concentrated for me. But I'm there. I check it. I do stuff sometimes. And anything I'm doing, I'll talk about there. Hollowed out releases and whatnot. We've got a new EP coming out in May. So
awesome. I listened to that song that y'all released the other day.
Ego Suicide.
Fantastic. Yes.
Thank you.
So definitely check Ego Suicide out.
Hell yeah.
It was
check it out.
the video that Jay did for y'all was fucking sick.
Hell yeah. He did a great job. It's awesome.
He absolutely did. So we will stop boring y'all with our stuff. Y'all can get to your homework of listening to Bass-ment Cuts by Inner City Posse.
Yeah, listen and then experience it with us.
For Eric, I am Aaron. Thank you so much for tuning in. And whoop whoop to all you listeners out there.